start? Okay. I'll stand up. I'm kind of short, so you might not be able to see me. But I'll tell you a little bit about me. I work at Charles Schwab with Megan. I've been in the industry for close to 10 years now. I am a financial consultant and a certified financial planner. What certified financial planners focus on is everything holistic about personal finances, from taxes, estate planning, investment management, retirement, you name it. I know a little bit about a lot. And the reason why I love what I do is because of things like this, right? I wasn't fortunate, actually I won't say I wasn't fortunate, but I didn't come from a financial background. My family's in finance. I come from a family of police officers, so all they know is, work 20 years, get a stable pension, and you're done. So I was really grateful to start at Schwab in the financial services industry, and it taught me a lot about financial freedom and taking ownership, and we're all in control of what our future looks like. So that's a little bit about me, that's why I'm here, and I hope you guys can get a lot out of this combo.
Thank you. And I'm Megan. I'm also a financial consultant with Devona at Charles Schwab. We work out of the office in the city on 23rd in Madison. So I would also encourage you guys, if you guys have questions after this or just want to come sit with us one-on-one, we'd love to see you guys again. But so I, like Devona, kind of happenstance landed in the financial services industry. I always wanted to be a therapist. I always wanted to work with people and get to know them, and that's what I love about this industry. So I really get to understand individuals and their families and actually help them reach the goals they're trying to accomplish, and that's what we love about this. And we're both so excited and happy to be here. We're so thankful to Vanessa for inviting us and to everyone for coming out. It's amazing that all these women are out here on a Monday night to talk about finances. And that's what we're passionate about, is educating women specifically. I mean, we love talking to men too, but it's awesome talking to a group of women about saving and investing. I think it's typically not women in the room talking about this, so we're so excited to be here and talk to all of you guys. So again, thank you so much for coming. Thanks for having us. And we're just really excited.
Great, thanks. And thanks Luceplan for having us.
Yes, thanks.
So we have questions that were culled from our surveys that we've done internally with the group, and questions we maybe didn't get to last year when we had a similar program. So I'm going to ask some of those. But also, if the question isn't on here, raise your hand, ask. Get the question answered, have a conversation. So, if you're just starting out, or even if you're not, maybe we should get you some questions. If you're a young person coming into our industry, which I think is fair to say pays modest wages initially until you start becoming into a senior role, 25 to 35 years old, what are the 5 things? What are 5 steps that you recommend?
Yeah, so what's funny is we did an event with Vanessa, maybe some of you guys were here for that a couple months ago probably, and we spent probably an hour talking about these 5 things, so we'll kind of briefly run through this, but again, I'm sure there'll be questions maybe after and we're happy to discuss. But so I would say the first thing we typically focus on with clients is if you have an employer-sponsored retirement plan, a 401k or a 403b, probably 401k's in the room, or maybe some of you are technically self-employed, but it's contributing as much as you possibly can into that employer-sponsored plan or to your own self-employed plan. We think paying yourself first is really important. Taking care of retirement is something you should focus on immediately. And especially with a 401k, if you have one, your employer might give you a match. It might be small, it might be 2, 3, up to 5%, and if they're giving that to you, you want to absolutely make sure you receive that money. That's free money you get every single year, so you want to take advantage of that.
Do any of you guys, just a show, do any of you ladies participate in a company-sponsored plan right now? Okay, and I'm hoping you all are contributing and getting something. Okay, great. So all right. The second thing would be an emergency fund. I think this is probably one of the most important things. So we recommend everyone, before they even get into investing, to have 3 to 6 months of emergencies that are nearby. Meaning in a checking account, primarily just a checking account. I wouldn't do savings. So having it liquid for all of your living expenses.
And the other 3, that was 2. Do your 401k, have an emergency fund.
Yes, we'd say the next one would probably be if you have any non-deductible debt, which is typically a credit card. If you have a credit card debt that you carry month to month, you want to work on paying that off as soon as possible. The more debt you carry, if you carry any, it just burdens you. You're not able to save, you're not able to invest, so you want to reduce that or eliminate that as soon as possible.
And when we talk about non-deductible debt, we are talking about credit cards, auto loans, anything other than a mortgage or a student loan. Student loans and mortgages do have some deductible and tax benefits. So we recommend, we'll get to that later, but we definitely think all non-deductible should be taken care of first. And then the fourth one would be, once you've done the company match, you have your 3 to 6 months of liquid emergency savings, and you have the non-deductible debt covered, we recommend you look at other additional tax advantageous savings accounts. What I mean by that is an IRA, individual retirement account. You can open that literally anywhere. You can open it at Charles Schwab, you can open it at your local bank, but pretty much those are other ways for you to boost your retirement savings. There are 2 types, and this can also be a whole long, deep conversation that I'd love to have, but there are 2 types that have 2 different benefits. There's a traditional IRA, depending on how much you earn, you can deduct the contribution to the IRA. And there's a Roth, which is my favorite. The Roth is a vehicle where you make an after-tax contribution with your money that you work hard to earn, and you put it in this IRA, and whatever investments grow within the account, it grows tax-free. So when you retire, 59.5 or older, you can take out all that money without paying a cent to the IRS, which I love. So that would be my choice if you had to pick one of the 2.
So Roth is after tax. What's the other one that is before tax?
Traditional.
Traditional.
So you get to deduct the contribution on your taxes. The contribution limit right now, I think it went up to $6,000 a year. So you can, say if you made $66,000, you can take $6,000 from your $66,000 that you earned and only be reporting $60,000 of income. So for some people, they prefer the deductibility, others they prefer the tax-free growth. But either one I'm happy with if it can help you boost your retirement savings. Questions, lady, on that? That could be a loaded one.
Yeah, no, that's and the 5th thing we recommend, you're probably thinking, okay, we're saving a lot for retirement, but there are other things in your life that are going to come up in the short term and midterm of your life that might be saving for a house, saving for your family, saving for your vacations, but you want to get some money invested outside of your retirement account. So that might be a brokerage account. So you can literally put in $1 every month. So maybe you put in $100 every month to start, or $100 every 2 weeks, and the power of that investing over time is great, even if you're putting a small amount in. So we'd say definitely sooner rather than later. There's no too small amount.
Yeah, and the cool thing that I like about investing in, like she said, different vehicles like mutual funds or exchange traded funds, some of them have an automatic feature. So if you're sending $100 a month to your brokerage account, you can set it up automatic where that $100 gets reinvested into this fund without you even having to think about it. So it's just, I always say just if you can, put as much as you can on auto when it comes to saving. So I kind of like that with the mutual funds to get started.
That's a new acronym, and we all know, SSL and CCT and CRI. What is ERM?
Oh, exchange traded fund, which I don't know if that added any more clarity.
What does that mean? What does it do?
So, okay, I'm going to try to make it simple as possible. So exchange traded fund, it is, do you all know what a mutual fund is?
Mm-hmm.
I'll just say it's an investment vehicle. It's an investment vehicle that individual investors could use to get exposure to a specific part of the market or the entire market itself, meaning U.S. equities or stocks or international. There's so many different components to the market, but the funds you can invest in, and they're being managed for you, and they're investing it into those different indices, if that makes any sense.
So instead of buying individual stocks, you might want to buy Apple, Google, a lighting company that you know, a design company, Facebook, companies that you know. Sometimes it can be very expensive and very time-consuming to purchase a bunch of different stocks of all these different companies that you love. So instead of buying 100 stocks, you could buy a mutual fund or a exchange-traded fund, ETF, which holds all of those companies already. So it's way cheaper, way easier, and then you can put it on autopilot, and you don't even have to watch those stocks because the ETF and the mutual fund does that for you. If that helps. I know these terms are confusing
good.
the first time you hear them.
Is it more important to invest in retirement vehicles were to save into a savings account? Again, limited incomes, just starting out. What do you vote first? What's the priority?
That's a tricky question. You definitely need to prioritize. I think we typically tell clients to prioritize their retirement accounts. Especially that employer-sponsored plan is putting as much in there as you can because it comes out of your paycheck. You don't have to think about it. But of course, you need enough, for your expenses every single month. So you have to be saving as well. So you have to find that right balance. So you might want to put together some type of a budget or really sit down and look at what your immediate expenses are. But I would say primarily focus on retirement, but you also want to be saving just for your emergency expenses. You want to have that emergency cushion available at all times, and you want to be saving for things other than retirement if possible.
Yeah, and I think another rule of thumb why we say retirement is a little bit more important than savings is with retirement, you can't catch up later in the game. It gets a lot harder the more you delay it. So if you could start, even if you're on a limited income, as soon as possible, there's money, and we'll get into this conversation, the money will continue to compound in a very tax efficient way. Because retirement vehicles, you don't pay, they come out of your income pre-tax, so you're not paying any taxes on it, and they grow tax deferred. So you're not paying any tax until much later in the future. So I think starting there, in your savings, you can always continue to build as you continue to earn. Whereas retirement, there could be limitations to catch up.
How does compound interest work?
So this is a tricky question.
Yeah.
But what I would start with, and we have some handouts which we can kind of pass around, which is a good example of how we think a good example of it explains compound interest. But I would say what we've been talking about is saving early on in your life, even if it's a small amount. Because of the compound growth, it's really meaningful over time. So if you can put in a couple $100 a month or $100 a month versus waiting until 5 years from now when you make more money and you've gotten your bonus, even if you're putting a small amount in, it's much more meaningful now because it'll grow over time. Even if it's in something like a money market fund that earns very little interest, that compound interest means a lot over time. So we have this sample, and again, we'll kind of pass this around so you guys can take a look. But this shows an example of two sisters, we'll say Maria and Anna. So they each invested $3,000 a year over a 10-year period. So Maria started investing first in 1996, and she invested her money for 10 years. And then she never invested again. And her sister Anna started in 2006 for the next 10 years, 2016. And if you guys look at the chart, they each invested $30,000, but because Maria started 10 years earlier, she had about $30,000 more than Anna at the end of that time period because of the time frame where it got to grow, even though she stopped investing when Anna started. Which is hopefully a good example of how you can see how that compound growth works. They invest the same amount of money, but Maria has a lot more to spend after that time period.
Because of the start time.
Because of the start time, exactly. And in this example, they invested in the exact same things. So she just got 10 more years of growth.
What are typical pitfalls we encounter while we save money? And how do we avoid those pitfalls? So what are the pitfalls and how do we step in the file? Yes.
I participated in back in the day when I was just getting started, and I tell everyone, don't do this. Do not have your savings in your checking in the same place. Just doomed fail. I'm kidding. My problem would be like, oh, I overspent my checking, so I guess I'll just take out of my savings now. And then I'm like, oh wait, now my savings empty. So,
which I think everyone is guilty of.
Yeah. So I really recommend if you can keep your nest egg and your savings in a separate place. No dip card, as far away from me as possible that you only need to dip into in extreme emergency situations. Because I find if it's too close to get to, we often find ourselves getting into it. So that's one of my pitfalls.
Yeah, that's a good one because I think everyone's affected by that or knows someone who does that. I'd say another one that I'd say we were fortunate enough to work in this industry from the very beginning. So, but I've seen a lot of my friends fall into this trap where they haven't asked the questions to their employer about their 401k. They don't really know what they're putting into it. They have no idea what the match is. They don't really know if they're getting it. And because it's not their day-to-day, it's not, something that they're thinking about, not something they're asking questions about. So I would say if you don't know, that's fine, but put it on your to-do list. This is something that's extremely important. You want to make sure you're getting that match. If you miss that match over this time period when you're earning money, it's accumulating, that can be a huge detriment to you in the future. And it's just simple as asking a question maybe, and then you can take advantage of it.
Is there any way to stretch a dollar? Like, is it great to put it in the 401k because that's the whole tax benefit, or are there other dollar stretching tricks?
Yeah, we would say that's one of them, especially because Devona mentioned this, and what you just mentioned is so true. The money in your 401k, your employer retirement plan, or your own retirement account, because you're not paying any tax while it's accumulating, which you would in your savings account or your brokerage account, if they're invested in the exact same things, the retirement accounts will grow a lot faster, especially with compound interest over time, because you're not paying tax on it. So that's why we keep stressing the importance of these retirement accounts. As long as you put money into them every year and you're making sure they're invested, they will grow for you. Even when the markets are being crazy, you've got a lot of time on your side. So I would say that's a big way to stretch your dollars, putting money into those retirement accounts.
Yeah, and the second way, I don't know if this is so much of a stretching the dollar, but I think sometimes when, okay, I'm gonna have to try. So I think sometimes as individuals, we get comfortable with savings. So like, okay, we have our emergency fund, now we have more money, and then, okay, we're gonna keep putting all this money into savings. But what we all fail to sometimes realize is inflation eats away at the value of our dollar. So our dollars are shrinking in our savings account once the savings gets too big. So I think the next way to stretch the dollar, once you have like a comfortable emergency savings, you're doing your 401k, would be to invest it. Because over time, and then many studies show that investing your money will help it grow to outpace with inflation and increase the value of your dollar.
Yeah, that is a big one. The people do tend to forget about their money in their checking account or their savings account. They know it's there and they're safe, and it's really nice to see that money in cash because you know it's not going to disappear. But even though we don't see it decrease, it technically is decreasing because inflation right now is at about 2.5%. So if your money is not outpacing that, then you're losing money every single year. So while we want you to maintain a savings, you don't want to keep too much in your savings.
What's too much? How do you figure out what's too much? Is there a percentage to your base?
Yeah, that's a good question. I do think it's different for everybody. We can always recommend keeping 3 to 6 months living expenses in your savings in that cushion at all times. You never know if you're going to get sick or lose your job, or anything terrible could happen. Hopefully knock on wood it doesn't happen. But that's what that cushion is there for. Some people want to keep a year's worth of expenses because they're very nervous, and that makes them feel very secure. And that's fine too, but you don't want to hold maybe much more than that.
Yeah, and I think it depends on the situation, because some people might work for companies, it might be more secure, like you said, some people might be self-employed, their money might be more variable, so they need a bigger cushion. But I think sometimes, and not often, but sometimes it gets to be, we don't even, like you said, we don't even know how much is too much until it is too much, right? So I think it's knowing, going back to the budget, right, how much is your monthly expenses, and times that by 3, 6, 9 months, whatever you think would make you feel comfortable knowing that you have in the bank or under the mattress or whatever. And if you don't have any other like immediate goals that require a big cash purchase, like a home or car or boat or something, you don't have any of those, and you just have much excess above what your emergency should be, then that should be a time when you start to think about investing and get into that kind of conversation.
Yes.
Are there any money market accounts out there, liquid money market accounts that pay aggressive interest versus just the 2.5 that are available now? That if you're looking for liquidity.
Yeah. If you're looking for liquidity and also safety, which most money market funds are, then no. I would say right now you might find a 2.5% money market fund, or a bank CD, or a treasury bill, which is a bond issued by the government. Those are all very safe and very liquid for the most part, at about 2.5%. So I would say,
Yeah.
But that's it?
more than that.
That's
Yeah.
it? There's really nothing other than that liquid-wise?
Right.
That, okay.
What is a money market fund?
Yeah, that's a great question.
So back to what we were talking about, like exchange traded funds, mutual funds. Money market fund is very similar, where it's a basket of different holdings. But what money markets focus on is short-term debt. So CDs underneath 12 months, treasury bills, and a variety of other complex note structures. So they've invested, it's pretty much a fund filled with short-term investment vehicles. So instead of you buying like multiple CDs and T-bills and all those things, it's all inside of a fund. And based on this array of different short-term investments, they're able to produce a yield. And that's like 2.5 or 2.2 or something of that nature. But yes, it's actively managed short-term instruments like CDs, etc.
And what about fees? Are there fees associated with a 401k or a money market fund, or how do you account for fees? How should we account for fees?
That's a great question. That's another way of how you could stretch your dollars and pay less fees as well. And that's something that's really important that we actually haven't talked about at all yet tonight. Because that should always be something at the front of your mind when you are investing or saving. You want to know what you're paying, because that's taking away from what you're earning. So with something like a money market fund or a mutual fund or an exchange traded fund, those are all vehicles that you can invest in, and they all do charge an annual expense because they're technically managing that money for you. So if you buy a money market fund, they're promising to pay you 2.5%, and inside the money market fund, they're investing in vehicles that are going to give that to you. So they have to take a percentage of that to be able to do all that. A mutual fund or an exchange traded fund does that same thing. Some mutual funds can charge over 1%. Some might charge 1/10 of 1% or even less than that. So it's just really important to ask the question or look for the information because it is very public. But you definitely want to know what you're paying.
Yeah, and the same thing goes for your 401k. The only thing about the 401k is it gets tricky because every plan is different. So I'll use myself and my husband for example. So his firm, they only offer mutual funds, which as she mentioned, they're actively managed, so they can be a little bit more costly, and that's out of his control. Whereas at Schwab, we have a variety. We can do mutual funds, we can self-manage it ourselves, we can choose very low-cost exchange-traded funds. But every year, I don't know if you guys get this, or it might be virtual now, but they send a packet, sometimes before you sign up, or right after, or every year, of all of the different funds and what their costs are. So it's kind of upon us to go through that. And with the 401k company, they have tons of employees that are there to help you figure out what's the most cost-effective way of diversifying my retirement assets versus picking it myself.
Mm-hmm. Is that why I've heard that if your employer doesn't match your 401k, that it's better that you just go and do your own 401k, maybe a Roth, because you have more control over what's like your value for what you're actually getting, and if so, how do you go about even starting to compare stuff like that, because I'm sure there's like huge diversity.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you in terms of an IRA and a Roth. I do love them because it's complete flexibility. You can buy, sell, whatever, however. The only difference between that and the 401k is the contribution limits. So with a traditional and a Roth, you can only put $6,000. Whereas a 401k or 403b, you can put, I think, $19,000 a year now. So it really depends on how much you can do per year. But if the max you can do is $6,000 and you want flexibility, I think an IRA or a Roth is a great plan if there's no company match.
To follow up on fees, because I literally just emailed you about this. So, and this is sort of coming off of the, I'm reading Tony Robbins' 7 Simple Steps to Financial Freedom, which I was on that. It's actually fabulous. But he talks about fees a lot, and like, as a new investor, when I see a fee that's 1.2%, I'm like, oh, that's tiny. But it's actually significantly more than 0.2%. In the sense that it's hundreds of thousands of dollars in your lifetime going to fees, right? Or is that, yeah.
It certainly could be depending on how much you invest. But yeah, absolutely. Nowadays, there are so many low-cost options. So you could buy something that's gonna charge you over 1%, and maybe a very similar vehicle exists that is gonna charge you 0.2. So,
Like an index fund.
like an index fund, exactly. So,
What's an index fund?
it's so funny. And you're good at explaining that. An index fund, so we've talked about mutual funds and exchange traded funds. So you could buy a mutual fund that holds 100 different stocks, and the mutual fund managers will actively manage that because they're gonna try to outperform what the market is doing. And because they're buying and selling these stocks behind, the curtain for you, you're not seeing all that happen, you just own the fund. But because they're doing all this active buying and selling, they're gonna charge you, let's say, 1%. And because you're paying 1% because you're being told that their job is to outperform the market. A lot of time on your side, and I'm not saying one's better than the other, but a lot of times an index fund can do just as good over time. Because who knows if that portfolio manager really is gonna outperform the market. But you're always gonna pay that 1%, even if the performance is down. And the performance is gonna be down sometime, because the market doesn't only go straight up. So an index fund is a similar vehicle, but instead of actively buying and selling, they're just gonna hold, let's say, the stocks in the S&P 500. If the S&P 500 makes a change of what's included in it, then the index fund will make a change. But otherwise, they're just gonna hold those stocks for you. And because they're just holding those 500 stocks, they're charging you 0.2 because they're doing very little work. So it's just a different type of investing. Sometimes it's nice to have a mix of them, but there are a lot of things like index funds now that charge very, very little. And that might be what's available in your 401k, which to Devonna's point is nice when they're in there, because it's very low cost options. Some only have the actively managed mutual funds.
Are one of those vehicles, can you rank them in as good, better, best, or 1, 2, 3? Is there one that you prefer because of growth or low fees or flexibility between mutual fund and an exchange traded fund and other documents, products?
Yeah.
Is that fair?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. Our rankings might be the same, but my favorite is the index fund. And I'll explain. Favorite is the index fund. The second is the exchange traded fund, and the last favorite, the least favorite, is the mutual fund. One, and this might be biased, but like Megan said, with active mutual funds, it's very hard to determine if they're going to always outperform their benchmark. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't, but history shows indices over time do just as good. So I'm not trying to knock the socks off the market. I'm fine with just keeping pace with the overall market. So mutual funds is my least because of the expenses, and it's hard sometimes to judge if it makes sense to pay such a higher fee for the active component. Second, I love ETFs. I invest in them all the time, but they trade like a stock. So stocks move up and down throughout the day. So sometimes if you buy an ETF throughout the trading day, it might move and you might get it at a price that's not at your favor. So it can be a little bit tricky to trade those on your own. But once you're in it, you kind of just leave it there. But sometimes you might pay a premium, depending on how the market's moving. The index fund I like because you buy or sell once a day at whatever that index closed at. There's no fluctuation based on supply and demand and bid and ask, which we're not going to go into that can get complicated. So index fund I think is simple, it gives you the exposure, and it's low cost.
Agreed?
For the most part, yeah. Very similar. I actually like ETFs. I'm with Devonna in that I want the least cost option, so I love ETFs and index funds. It's funny because I prefer to invest in ETFs because I like that they fluctuate in price throughout the day. Because I like to see if I can get a lower price, which is probably not good either. But very similar philosophy in that we each like that index approach where you pay very low cost, you move with the market, so you might see a lot of fluctuations. But if you've got time on your side, we think that's absolutely fine. You're paying a very low cost. And studies show that markets move in cycles between 3 to 5 years. There's going to be a lot of ups and downs and around the corners, but over time, the market has an upward trend. So as long as you stay invested, you're, I want to say guaranteed to earn money over the long term. It might not be over the short term, but as long as you ride that wave and you're not panicking when the market goes down, you will earn money over the long term, which is why we both like that index approach, because we're okay with the ride, we just want to be invested.
And is there should you periodically check your closet, check your savings, or your portfolio, your documents, and how often do you check products?
I love that question.
Yeah. I think it's very specific on the individual. Like, I'm like crazy. Like, I check like every day, and it's also my job. So it really depends. But I would say on the minimum, you should do an annual checkup of, your investing, your retirement savings, your budgeting, etc. That should all be revisited on an annual basis. For people who want to be more involved, I think quarterly is, the best. Kind of balance of, being way too concerned and way not concerned. But minimum 1 year, and if ideal, I would say quarterly. Reviewing everything.
I would totally agree with that. And we haven't talked much about this, but let's say in your 401k, you've got a nice mix of stocks and bonds, the more risk, the less risk pieces of the investments. If you don't look at it, and your 401k might not be the best example because that is managed for you, but if you have a self-directed, self-managed retirement account, an IRA, and you start out with 60% in stocks and 40% in bonds, if you don't look at that for the next couple of years, by the time you look at it, that mix is not going to be 60-40 anymore. It might be 90-10 if the market's gone up, or it might be the other way around. And so maybe now you're taking way more risk than you wanted to, or you're way more conservative than you want to do because of the way the market moved. So that's why we recommend paying attention to that at least once a year. Not only will the market change, like I just mentioned, but things in your life might change as well. Maybe you thought buying a home was 10 years away and you weren't ready to start saving for that, but maybe something will change, and maybe now it's 3 to 5 years and you really want to start making sure you're invested appropriately for that goal. But you definitely just want to check in at least once a year.
Talk about buying a home for a minute. How do you know, is renting best because this is Manhattan and it's all we can afford? or is home purchasing something we should all be working for right now? What is appropriate? And is it ever not appropriate?
Yes.
This is a hard question.
It's
for me.
a tough question. So you talk about your experience.
So I was recently going to buy a house as recently as 6 months ago, and I kind of backed out because I think I was looking at it for the wrong reasons. And the reasons why I don't think you should buy a home with the idea this is going to be an investment. Like, I'm going to buy this home for $250 and then tomorrow it's going to be $550. It takes a while sometimes for homes to appreciate, and sometimes depending on the cycle, like the investment stock market goes through cycles, so does real estate. So you don't know if you're getting at a good time, bad time, so it should never be something where you're looking to make a quick investment. I think that's kind of where I was looking at it. I'd be like, okay, step back, what's the real reason? So I think that's the first thing, and run the numbers, right? See if this is something that's feasible and something that you can fit into your life and your expenses, because sometimes you might bite off more than you could chew. So I think that's an important thing to look at when thinking about renting versus buying, right? Renting, like you said, could sometimes be a good solution because we can afford it. Sometimes we, $1 million houses and all the crazy things you see in New York City, it sounds great to own a home in New York, right? But you want to be able to sustain that, be able to afford it. And then the last thing that I have for you guys is put down at least 20%. And that could be a huge amount depending on the home in New York, right? But by putting down 20%, you save yourself from paying PMI, which is principal mortgage insurance, something like that. It's mortgage insurance, right? So it's an additional monthly amount that you have to pay, which should be a couple $100 or more, because you're getting in at a lower price. You're putting in a lower down payment, so you're putting in less than 20%, 10%. Some of them you could do 3.5% down, but because you're putting up less of the value of the home, you're gonna have to pay for it by paying this insurance on top of your mortgage that might already be hefty. So then you have all these expenses that you have to keep up with. So I say if you could, and if home ownership is something you want, try and shoot for that 20% down, because it'll save you down the long run instead of paying all that insurance.
And if you're renting, and you got a significant other, but someone makes more, someone makes less, is there a ratio that you can figure out to make it equitable and affordable for both? Because maybe there's a situation where someone can contribute more, but how, is there a scale that you can say if you're earning X, 70% of your salary should go, or does it always have to be split down the middle? And I know it's a personal, I mean, it can be personal, it's very subjective based on the deal, the relationship, but any insight there?
Yeah, it is a really good question. I think less maybe about the relationship, because you could break it out between the person that you're with, but I think we typically tell clients, you don't really want to be spending, it's hard in New York. I think New York's a very different circumstance because, there are not many low-cost options here. But we'd like to see clients not spend more than 30% of their salary on housing, rent, or their mortgage, and their maintenance, their taxes. That can be very difficult here, but I think that's the number we like to shoot for.
And in terms of your question about splitting, so if one person earns more and another person earns less, you can do, and it's up to the couple, right? If they want to, apply for the mortgage together, and since one earns more, they might be able to qualify for a bigger loan, and then you can work out the logistics around who pays how much and what once everything goes through.
So 30% is a good rule of thumb.
Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe with the two of you, you combine your incomes and you look at what that really looks like as a
Right.
whole. But yeah, we try to aim for that 30%.
Okay. Questions, issues?
Before or after taxes?
We say before taxes, right?
Gross, yeah.
Gross, yeah, before taxes. A good question.
Back to the 401k discussion. Let's say I was working for a company, I contributed to my 401k. Now I've left that company and I've gone to a new company. Do I A, keep my money with my old company because it's doing pretty well? Or B, do I move it? And then if I do move it, where would you suggest it gets moved to? So you don't have to incur all those tax, because you took the money out.
Yes.
Penalties.
That's an excellent question. So you do have those three options. You can keep it where it was in the old 401k plan with your previous employer. You can move it into your new 401k if you have one, or you could move it into an IRA in your name. I do typically say it's personal preference. What I typically recommend though is not leaving it in the old 401k because it can get lost and forgotten. And we see that a lot when we meet with clients who make their 50s and they've got 6 old 401ks and they don't know where they are. And that's a headache. And you don't want to make those 6 phone calls either. But so I would say you either move it into the new 401k if you like that it's just automatically invested with the employer, or if you want the control, you open up an IRA in your name. And
Yeah, so let's say if you do 2 of the other options where it's rolling it into your new 401k, I always say before you make that leap, make sure the plan you're moving it to has similar options, right? Because sometimes we move it and then we get there and we're like, no, they don't have what I want, or something like that. So make sure you look to see what their investment structure is before you move it. But when you move assets from a 401k to a 401k, it is a non-taxable occurrence. When you move money from a 401k to a traditional or rollover IRA, which are the same, it is not a taxable occurrence either. The only time it's a taxable occurrence is if you say, I want to take a distribution, which is you're taking it out. You're taking money out. It's not being rolled over to any other tax-deferred or tax-advantageous vehicle.
In regards to student loans, I have maybe a large amount of student loans. Moving to New York has kind of inhibited me from being able to give a lot of money, so I give the bare minimum amount. What are your thoughts on how much should we give for student loans is one question. And then another question, do student loans, is it good debt, is it bad debt? If I want to invest in something or buy a house one day, is that going to prohibit me from getting some of those things?
good question.
Repeat the question just for everybody else.
Oh, yeah, so for those who couldn't hear, she asked about her student loans. If someone does have student loans and they're not able to save as much as they want to and they're putting the minimum on their student loans, is that a problem? Is that going to affect them negatively from being able to buy a house in the future or get approved for something later on? And, student loans is technically considered good debt. I know it's not good debt, but it's a better debt to carry than a credit card or a a car loan. Student loans typically have a lower interest rate, which is good. So I'd say you definitely want to pay attention to what interest rate you're paying. There are a lot of companies now, I think one's called SoFi, where you can get that rate reduced. So maybe some of you have done that already. So that's something that, good, you really want to pay attention to that rate. I would say you really want to make sure you're putting as much as you can into that while maintaining your lifestyle, or maintaining as much of your lifestyle as you want to. I don't think it will prohibit you from being able to get a loan in the future.
Yeah, and I think this goes back to like our savings principle. So having the emergency fund, even if you have student loans, still don't give up on saving for retirement. Whatever, you could just put up to the match, do it, and then non-deductible debt, hit that, and then IRAs if you can. It might not be a priority for you. You might want to then, I would say, start to tackle the deductible student loans.
And yeah, and so the
It's like a
good thing
little
about
order.
student
It fits in
loans.
that you all.
Yes, yeah, we can.
Yeah.
And so, like she said, the good thing about student loans is you do get a tax deduction for carrying that debt. That's why it's considered good debt. even though-
But isn't it unforgivable, like if you can't, it doesn't ever go away, like if you claim bankruptcy or something? That's one of the debts that doesn't actually go away?
That's a great question. I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
It's
And also-
correct, if you claim bankruptcy, your student loan never goes away as a.
Correct.
I also heard with these Sophie and Laurel Road companies, when you move it into a private fund like that, it doesn't go away if you die. Whereas if you keep your student loan with the government, it's forgiven upon death. But with all these companies that pop up in my mailbox, it's not, it's passed along to your.
Seriously?
That's
Wow.
a good bit of information to know.
Did everybody hear that?
Death goes to your next of kin.
Oh, you would hear it.
What a racket.
So if someone didn't hear her, I guess the companies where you can refinance your debt technically goes to a private financer who holds the debt for you instead of being with the government. So if you were to pass away, the debt doesn't go away. It, I guess, passes on to your family or your children, which is something you definitely want to be aware of before you enter into that agreement.
We can talk about 529.
There we go.
Yes.
The next generation.
Is an expert on
I do like 529s actually.
So, that's a good question.
So 529s, I actually have two, one for my niece and one for my baby sister. So 529s are a great way to save for children's education, family members, grandchildren, cousins, you name it. You can have anybody as a beneficiary that you can give to. The reason why I like 529s is there's also a good tax component to it. So with 529s, I think you can do, you can gift, I don't remember exactly. Yeah, you could do 10,000 a year is deductible. But you can gift up to 30K a year, or you can do a lump sum of 5 years, so 50 times 30, you can get one shot. Which most people don't do, but you can. So it's a good, I mean, that's great if you can, but it's a great gifting strategy and you can get the state tax deduction. But you have to make sure it's a New York State plan. I think it's called New York City Saves. So you can put up to 30K a year, gifting tax, no gift tax. And once you go over 30K, there could be gift tax complications, but you get the 10K deduction if you're married, 5K if you're single.
And the minor can use that money tax-free for education.
Yes.
Which is the big benefit for who you're putting it in the name of.
Yes, and another benefit is, there's like little nuances I keep forgetting as I'm talking, but say, for example, one of your kids that you name as the beneficiary says, I don't want to go to college, I don't want to do it. Like, no, not me. You can change the beneficiary. You can make it your next child, you can make it yourself if you want to go back to school, you can name yourself as a beneficiary. So it's very flexible compared to some other education savings, and it's invested. Yes.
And if they get scholarships, you can get the cash back.
Yes.
Go.
I have a question about this, going back to the student loans. So my question is it better after merit aid and 529s, if there is money that needs to be taken out on loan, is it better for the parent to sign on the Parent Plus, or should the student take out the loans clear and free of the parent signing?
with them?
I really don't know the answer to that.
Yeah,
question.
me either.
I would recommend talking to a banker or someone at a student-owned company who can really tell you all the nuances about that.
Yeah.
You were saying you could do a 529 for yourself. Can you use that towards like a continuing education type thing, or does it have to be an official of going back for another degree?
I think it has to be, I don't know if it's for like certifications or programs, I think it has to be like another like degree. I don't know, but it doesn't have to be bachelor's or MBA or anything, but I definitely know it has to be a degree. I don't think we can use it towards like if you want to take like a financial certification or something like that.
For the one I'm doing FAFSA right now, and it said high school tuition, it was just added recently this year, so it's high school and college.
High school, yeah, high school up to 10K. Any,
Nice.
yeah,
So I don't think it covers any types of certification.
yeah, just education. Thanks.
Hi, I just have a quick question about trusts and wills. Do you guys discuss those types of things?
What's the
might be
question?
When you're alive, you should have a trust and you should have a will, and you should put like things, valuable things into that. So I guess I'm wondering, like, if you don't have much, like, how you start that.
It's actually a really good question, and we didn't talk about that at all, and it can be a very complex issue. So we're obviously not estate attorneys, but we recommend everyone create a will. So if you have really any assets or any debts, I think you do want to create a will, and it can be done very simply. I think you can do it online. You could make an appointment with an estate attorney if you want to, but I think cheapest, the easiest would just be to create something online, especially if you have very small amounts of assets if you're just getting started. I don't think everyone needs a trust. It can be a very good way. It can be a good estate planning tactic, and people use it for different reasons. But I would say a will is universal. For the most part, everyone needs one. I agree with that.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I do have a will and a trust in place. My daughter has special needs trust set up. We're not currently contributing to it, but through my life insurance, it's set up so in the event that my husband and I should pass, everything else we have will pour into that trust. And then if like Uncle Steve wants to put into her trust, there's certain ways to do that. I don't remember all those, but I thought that was great. It's not just the parents that can contribute, but you do now. They can set away so it's tax beneficial for them. I'm not entirely sure, but like I said, the trust is set up. It's just kind of sitting there right now, but it can be contributed. And I think once we're taking care of our student loans and everything, we'll start like slowly putting stuff into that as well.
Perfect.
Yeah, and another, it's kind of connected to the conversation about trust and wills. All of you should have beneficiaries set up, because that supersedes a trust or a will. So if you have assets in a brokerage company, your 401k, all that stuff should be titled appropriate to who you want it to go to, because that cannot be contested.
Rebecca?
Can you talk a little about your services and what you do and how you help us and the different types of people that are out there saying that they can help us?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. So we, in our role, we have clients that we work with, and we love working with new clients as well, but our main job is really just to get to know our clients on a personal level, understanding their individual dynamic, their family dynamic, what their job is like, what their income is, what their financial life is like, and making sure that they're invested appropriately to reach whatever goals they're trying to accomplish in the most efficient way, in the most tax efficient way, looking at all these different things. So like Devona mentioned at the very beginning, we're not an expert in all of these areas, but we know a little about a lot. That was really good saying.
Yeah.
But we have a lot of partners within Schwab too. So if we need to loop in a wealth strategist, we can help you with setting up a trust or discussing what type of trust might be appropriate for you. We can do that as well. If you want to give to charity, we can bring in that specialist. So very different resources we have under the Schwab umbrella. But our main job is really to help our clients make sure they're invested appropriately to reach those financial goals that they're trying to accomplish.
Are you fiduciaries, or like do you work for us or do you work for Schwab, and like where does I know that there's two types of people that work for the bank versus for the investor?
Yeah, that's a great question.
I would definitely say yes to both. I do work for my clients and I do work for Schwab, so I definitely think there's certain policies I need to adhere to both sides of the spectrum. I'm also a certified financial planner, so I do have to report to a board, so there's a fiduciary capacity there. But I think in the way that we're aligned with how we present different strategies to our clients, none of them are, we don't get paid any differently. So there's no conflict if I sell you a Schwab fund versus a fund from Vanguard versus, this stock. There's no conflict of interest. Schwab positions us to look out for the best interests of the clients and the company as well. We want to have integrity when we do business.
Yeah, so in a lot of words, we are technically fiduciaries. If we did anything that was unsuitable for a client, Schwab would kick us out immediately. And like you said, we're not incentivized to push products, and we're also salaried employees for the most part. So we really get to take time to get to know our clients and making sure everything is appropriate.
You're not incentivized to push products.
Right.
So what happens if you have a relationship now, you've got to know Rebecca, and she is interested in taking the next step, and does she get transferred along to someone else who can recommend products specific to her needs? Or do you handle all of her needs?
Yeah, so we could handle the relationship. And it's not that we're not able to talk about products within the Schwab umbrella. We're just not incentivized to push something over something else. It's really, if you want to manage the funds on your own, or if you want Schwab to manage them for you, all of that's wonderful. Here are what your options are. So we would help from beginning through life, through it.
Is there a period where somebody is getting into stocks and mutual stocks that there are tools that you might suggest they look into and shadow and watch it daily to see if they have the wherewithal? Like, how do you start with stocks?
Yeah.
Good question. The thing I love about Schwab is we have free workshops all over the city, and they range from how to screen stocks, how to use the tools, how to use the website, how to do research, to just like broad basics about investing. So I think going to those workshops, talking with people that are investing and people that are new like you and learning kind of how you can get started, I think that was one of my favorite things about starting at Schwab, because we do have them all over the city for free to come in. And usually an hour and 30, and it goes over all those things like you said, like just basics. How do we get started? How do we research? How do we know how we should be invested? How should we allocate our money? So that we do those all over, like every month.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about target funds, like retirement target funds? Because I think I'm actually invested in a Schwab retirement target fund, but it was Jack Bogle recently died, and he created Vanguard, and I think he was very anti-target funds. That's been in the news a lot recently. So, what do you think about them?
What is a target fund?
I love her.
You're good at fund explanations. I'm bad at that. I just got so a targeted fund, we've talked about mutual funds. It is a mutual fund. Instead of just having a mutual fund that's holding stocks inside the S&P 500, these are funds that, and it could be stocks, it could be bonds, it could be other vehicles inside there as well, but they're targeting the year you're gonna retire. So it might be 2055 target date fund. And what that just generally means is it's gonna be more risk today, and as it gets longer in time, closer to that year, it'll become more and more conservative. So, I kind of have mixed thoughts on targeted funds. Some people really feel strongly that they're not great, and some people love them, and I think they're fine. I think they do what they're supposed to do. I think some targeted funds can be expensive. A lot of companies, including Schwab, now have index target date funds where they only use index funds inside that target date fund to keep the expenses lower. But I'd say for someone who really wants to be hands-off and doesn't want to really have to manage, a bunch of different funds or stocks, you could just buy a target date fund, and it kind of does all the work for you. But it does depend a little bit on your own investing philosophy, but it could be a great way to get started.
Do you have any book or
podcast recommendations for just that we could delve more into information like this for amateurs and people that are new to this.
I love the So Money podcast.
I was gonna say so much.
That is my.
It's so good.
It has like
Wait, what is it?
So Money by Baruch something. It's So Money. It's great. They have like 3,000 episodes, so you will definitely have stuff to listen to. But they go over so many different topics about like behavioral finance and how do I buy versus rent, how do I rent versus buy or buy versus rent, how to get started, how do I know, how do I talk about budget. They do everything.
Yeah.
And they have some great speakers. That is like,
Cool.
yeah, I recommend it.
So money?
So money. Yeah. It's like 30 minutes an episode, so like on your ride in, if you take the subway, you get through it.
I have a question in regards to debt. You had mentioned that student loans are a good type of debt. Obviously, credit card being bad. Would you recommend using some of your savings to just sort of pay off all that credit card debt? Or like how do you find that balance between paying off credit card and still maintaining savings?
It's a great question. I mean, short answer, I would say yes. You definitely want to take your savings to pay off your credit card, but you want to leave yourself enough of a cushion to be stable.
Yeah.
So if right now you
So it's
really
like how do you
don't
find that
have any
balance?
to give up, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what's tough, is finding that balance.
Yeah.
Maybe it's slowly dripping on that credit card bill, a little bit every month to slowly reduce it. The reason I say yes so strongly to reduce that credit card debt is that rate they're charging you might be 18, 19, 20%. And if you're paying 20% to your credit card company, there's no way you're making money anywhere else.
Yeah.
So, but you want to find that balance. And so the other thing you could also do is move that credit card balance to another credit card.
Oh, I
maybe
play that game all the
0%.
time. I do it to 0%, 12 months, okay, then move it over here.
So that's a really good strategy.
Yeah, so I play that game all the time between all my credit cards. I'm constantly juggling, which I don't know in the long run, so now is that affecting my credit score somehow in doing that? Okay.
Yeah, so I think there's a couple components when it comes to your credit. It's the length. I think the length is like one of the more important part. Utilization, what's the percentage of utilization that you're using, and how many inquiries. Like, so I think 1 a year is okay, but once it starts getting more than that, then it can slowly bring your score down. For any like delinquencies, it would be a fourth one. So yeah, I definitely think it's important to, like you said, after a while it could hinder you.
Yeah.
So what I would recommend, if you only have 3 to 6 months savings right now, and you don't want to like take it and then start from scratch, keep your savings as is, and whatever you put in the savings, put it on your credit card. So 500 was going to savings, put that on the credit card, and it's gone.
Okay.
And just keep that nest set and go crazy paying
And it's
off.
okay to have zero debt, because sometimes I've heard that having like no debt is sometimes hurtful as well.
I think when people say having no debt can be hurtful, just meaning if you've never opened a credit card and
Okay.
you don't use a credit card for expenses. Like the best case scenario is to use your credit card but to pay it off.
And then
every
pay it
single
off.
month. Yeah.
Okay.
What is a good credit score? What's the number?
Great question.
You know the numbers on the line.
I kind of maybe do, I think. I definitely think it's anything, I'm leaning towards it might be in the high 600s, but I definitely think it's close to 700 and up is considered good.
Some people know
Yeah,
what
700 is something.
800 is like.
I know it goes to like 900 or something, I don't even know, but
You can check it nowadays. Most
Yeah,
credit card providers.
They hide it for free,
Yeah.
yeah, Capital One does.
they give the alerts and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. Credit Karma's
Yes,
great.
Credit Karma.
Yeah, they're great, yeah.
Other questions?
When you're looking for a savings account, do you recommend going to an online saving bank instead of like a brick and mortar bank that they have to pay for their rent and stuff like that? Is it better to go to an online bank?
I love this question. So I have a lot of my money at Schwab, but I love online savings banks. I think they're the best way to put the liquid savings cash.
Are there some that you would recommend?
I have Discover has online savings. I think they pay 2.2 2.15 or something like that. Ally Bank pays 2.2. I like Ally so far, that's the one I'm feeling out.
Which one?
Ally Bank?
I use them, they're very, like, the people who work there
They're
are
so
very
great,
nice,
yeah.
like, it's a really easy, like,
Yeah.
and a friend of mine just was like, oh, I saw her card, I said, oh, what's that? And now I have like all of them.
Yeah.
Like their biggest spokesperson.
Yeah, they're
that they
great.
don't know about. It literally, like, over the year, it's gone from like, I think, like 0.75 up to 2.2.
Yeah.
Ally?
Ally, I read it.
A-L-L-Y.
And the website is purple and so pretty.
It's like a lady. But it's great.
It's wonderful. Other questions?
I have a retirement question, if this
Okay.
is too complicated, you can let me know. But our company started a matching 401k a few years back, like 4%. Then the next year, they decided to change it. And instead of the matching plan, they did a flat plan at a lower percent, and then they started this cash balance plan, which none of us really understood. And I was wondering if you know anything about cash balance and how that would be beneficial, that they only gave that to certain people and not others, and like a lot of us are trying to figure out what's really going on and is this really a good thing? Or should we all be asking for it instead of some people?
This is a hard question.
Any
but
thoughts you have?
I could answer a baby bit. So, the 401k is deferred compensation plan. Like, so we're paying into the system, right, ourselves from our own pay, and we hopefully get a company match. Cash balance plan is slightly different. It's a pension. So typically the company, and I'm not sure how it's structured here, but typically the company pays into it at a specific percentage for you. So typically, from what I know, pension plans, I mean, they're like the day of the past, but they're a good thing because the company's paying into it for you. I'm not sure what their specifics are, but typically at a certain age, you get like they don't guarantee the specific amount, but they continue to invest it at the percentage and whatever it is at the end. You can annuitize it or you can
Is
take
it
it
the kind of
out.
thing that travels with you, like a 401k, you can move it?
Yes.
If you need.
You can. So you can take it, roll it as a lump sum into an IRA, or you can, some clients annuitize their pension, so like say if they, they're 65 and they grew to be 300, the companies will sometimes have a calculation, based on this amount, you can get XYZ per month for forever until you die, or a specific benefit that can go to you and then to your next of kin. So there's usually a couple options, but it's great because it's money that the company's putting for you. It's not something that you're not paying into it. So it's like an added bonus. You get it.
So I'd say ask.
Yeah, definitely ask.
We can have really good straight answers. It's conveniently so complicated that I don't quite get it.
Yeah.
So we have a lot. Thanks.
All right, I think we're good then. I think this was a great session. We'll say thank you for coming.